I found a hidden bank account under my husband's name, with over $100,000 missing from our joint savings. Shocked, I hired a private investigator. 2 weeks later, I got the photos, him, a woman, and a baby. That night, I laid out the pictures on the dinner table. As he walked in, I simply asked, "When were you planning to tell me about them?" His face turned ghostly white. My husband, Daniel, not his real name, and I had been married for 12 years. We lived in Chicago, had a good life. No kids, but plenty of plans for the future. For most of our marriage, I thought we were solid. Sure, we had our fights, but nothing out of the ordinary. At least, that's what I told myself. Then, little things started to add up. He started coming home later. Said work was crazy busy, and that he had meetings that ran late. Fine, okay, jobs can be demanding. But then came the nights when he didn't come home at all. He'd text me some excuse, stuck at the office, last-minute client dinner, too tired to drive home. Then the phone. Always in his hand, always on silent. If I so much as glanced at it, he'd tilt the screen away. And the money. I handled our finances, and for years, nothing seemed off. But then, one night, I logged into our joint savings account and felt my stomach drop. The balance was wrong. Like, really wrong. We had been building that account for years, putting aside money for our future, our safety net. We should have had over $150,000 saved up. But what I saw? Barely $40,000 left. Over $100,000 gone. I felt sick. I refreshed the page. Again. And again. Same number. I confronted him the second he walked in the door that night. "Where's our money?" He blinked at me. "What?" I turned the laptop around, shoved the screen toward him. There should be over 100 grand in here, Daniel. Where the hell did it go?" He barely glanced at it before sighing, like I was annoying him. "Jesus, my name, you're being dramatic." "I'm being what?" My hands were shaking. "This isn't a small amount, Daniel. Where is it?" He sat down, rubbing his temples like this was exhausting for him. "I moved some of it." "Some of it?" I snapped. "Where?" "A separate account." "Why?" "It's for investments," he said, still not looking at me. "I didn't want to worry you with it. Stocks, a little crypto, stuff you wouldn't understand." That made me pause. Because Daniel wasn't a risk taker. He barely used our credit card without asking me first. And now he was gambling with our savings? But he was so calm, so casual about it. And I wanted to believe him. So I let it go. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I didn't sleep that night. Or the night after. The whole thing gnawed at me, like a warning siren blaring in the back of my mind. The next week, while he was at work, I dug deeper. I checked our bank statements, credit cards, everything. That's when I found it. A separate checking account under his name. At first, I thought maybe it really was for investments. But then I looked at the transactions. Hotel stays. Expensive dinners. Gifts from high-end stores I'd never set foot in. A second rent payment. I felt like I was going to throw up. That's when I knew. I hired a private investigator the next day. 2 weeks. That's how long it took. 2 weeks of pretending everything was fine. 2 weeks of waiting for him to walk through the door with that same easy smile, like he wasn't lying to my face. Then I got the call. The investigator had the results. "You're going to want to see this in person," he said. I met him at a coffee shop downtown. He slid a manila folder across the table. I knew before I even opened it. The first picture was of him, sitting across from a woman at a restaurant, holding her hand. The second picture? Them kissing. The third? Him, the woman, and a baby. A baby who had his eyes. I couldn't breathe. My head was spinning. I don't remember getting home. I don't remember the drive. All I know is that when I got there, I sat at the kitchen table for hours, staring at those pictures. That night, I laid them out on the table. Neatly. Like evidence. Like proof that I wasn't crazy. When Daniel walked in, he barely looked at me. Just tossed his keys on the counter, loosened his tie. Then he saw them. He froze. For the first time in 12 years, I watched the color drain from his face. I didn't yell. Didn't scream. Didn't cry. I just said, "When were you planning to tell me about them?" His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. Silence. The kind that suffocates. I waited. Then, he did something that made my skin crawl. He laughed. Not a nervous chuckle. A full, bitter laugh. Like he'd been caught in some stupid prank. "Wow," he muttered, shaking his head. I really thought I had more time. More time? What the hell does that mean? My voice came out like a whisper, but I felt like I was screaming inside. He ran a hand through his hair, looking everywhere except at me. "I was gonna tell you. Eventually." "Tell me what?" "That you've been cheating on me? That you have a child with someone else." He swallowed. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. What wasn't supposed to happen, Daniel? The silence stretched. Finally, he exhaled, sitting down. Stephanie wasn't supposed to get pregnant. Stephanie. She had a name. My hands clenched into fists. How long? He stared at the table. How long? I repeated. 5 years, he finally admitted. I felt something inside me crack. Like finally, the weight of the lie was off his chest. Like I was the one who needed to process it, not him. And in that moment, I realized I was married to a stranger. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the man I thought I knew. 5 years. 5 years of him looking me in the eye and lying straight to my face. 5 years of him taking money from our future to support them. 5 years of sharing a bed with me while going home to her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. But instead, I just sat there, gripping the edge of the table so hard my nails dug into the wood. And Daniel? He just sat across from me, rubbing his jaw like this was some inconvenient conversation he had to get through. So what now? I asked, my voice low. He blinked. What do you mean? What do I mean? I let out a sharp laugh. Are you seriously asking me that? He exhaled, shaking his head. Look, I'm sorry, all right? I never wanted to hurt you. My stomach twisted. You never wanted to hurt me? I repeated, voice shaking. You stole from me. You stole our savings. You built a whole other life while lying to my face. You have a child with someone else. And you never wanted to hurt me. I watched his jaw tighten. His hand tapped against the table, a nervous habit I'd seen a million times before. Do you love her? I asked. He flinched. That told me everything I needed to know. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. You do, I whispered. He looked down. Didn't answer. And somehow, that was worse than if he had just said yes. I should have left right then. Packed a bag and walked out the door. But something about the way he was so calm made my skin crawl. There was something else. Something I didn't know yet. I narrowed my eyes. Why didn't you leave me? His head snapped up. What? If you love her. If you have a child with her. If you've been with her for 5 years, why stay? Why keep coming home to me? His throat bobbed as he swallowed. It's not that simple. It is that simple, I shot back. You could have told me. You could have divorced me. But instead, you lied. You kept both of us in the dark. His fingers curled into a fist. I couldn't just walk away, okay? There's more to it than that. I felt my heart pounding in my ears. What do you mean? Silence. Then, she knows about you. My blood ran cold. She what? He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Stephanie. She knows about you. She's always known. I couldn't breathe. You mean to tell me, she knew about me this whole time, and you still stayed with her? He nodded. She was okay with it. For a while, at least. She didn't want me to leave you. She just wanted to have her place too. I felt like I was going to be sick. All this time, I thought I was the fool. Thought I was the only one in the dark. But no. I almost ignored it. Almost blocked her and pretended she didn't exist. But a part of me, maybe the part that still needed answers, responded. Me, about what? She didn't text back. She called. I hesitated, then picked up. What do you want? There was a long pause. Then, a deep breath. I didn't know he was still lying to you, she said. I froze. What? Her voice was quiet. Tired. I thought you knew about us. He told me you two were staying together for legal reasons. That you guys weren't together anymore. That you had your own life. A sharp, bitter laugh escaped my lips. Wow. He really played both of us, huh? She exhaled. Yeah. I could hear something in her voice. Something I wasn't expecting. Pain. I almost didn't care. Almost let my anger drown out any sympathy I might have had. But then she said something that made my blood turn to ice. I think he's hiding more than just the affair. My breath caught. What do you mean? I think he's in trouble, she said. And I think he's dragging both of us into it. I met her at a cafe the next morning. I don't know what I expected. Maybe someone younger, someone who looked like she belonged in a Second Life fantasy. But she wasn't that. She was just a woman. Dark circles under her eyes. Hands wrapped around a coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping her together. She looked just as wrecked as I felt. We sat in silence for a while. Then she pulled out her phone and slid it across the table. A bank statement. I skimmed it, not understanding at first. Then I saw the number. $100,000 deposited. I frowned. This is the money from our savings. She nodded. He transferred it. To my account. My hands started to shake. Why? She took a deep breath. That's what I'm trying to figure out. He told me it was to take care of us, but I never touched it. I thought he was being responsible. But now, after what you told me, she met my eyes. I don't think this money was his to give. A chill ran down my spine. I knew Daniel had taken the money. But now, for the first time, I was starting to think. Maybe it wasn't just to support her and the baby. Maybe there was something bigger happening. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the only one he was lying to. Stephanie and I sat in that cafe for what felt like forever, neither of us saying a word. My brain was on fire, trying to piece it all together. Daniel had stolen over $100,000 from our savings and dumped it into her account, without her even knowing the full truth. But why? Why not spend it himself? Why hide it under her name? And then Stephanie said something that made my stomach twist. He told me to withdraw it. In cash. I stared at her. What? She nodded, fingers gripping the coffee cup so tight I thought it might shatter. A few months ago, he started getting weird about money. He told me to take out as much as I could, in cash, and hold on to it for him. When I asked why, he just said, "It's safer this way." Safer. The word lingered in my head like a warning. What did you do with it? I asked. She exhaled. I still have most of it. I only took out a few thousand here and there when we needed something. But the rest. I hid it. In my apartment. My pulse pounded in my ears. You mean to tell me there's over $80,000 in cash just sitting in your apartment? She nodded. I rubbed my temples. Stephanie, that's insane. You should have put it back in the bank. I tried, she snapped. But when I told him I wanted to, he lost it. He said I had to keep it hidden. That if anyone asked, I never got the money at all. A chill ran down my spine. What the hell is he into? I whispered. She swallowed. I don't know. And for the first time, I realized she was just as scared as I was. The next few days were a blur. I avoided Daniel. Didn't go home. Stayed in hotels, kept my phone on silent, ignored his texts. But the more I thought about it, the worse it got. Because this wasn't just cheating anymore. This wasn't just a betrayal. But I felt it. Someone watching me. I tried to shake it off. Told myself I was being paranoid. But when I got into my car and started the engine, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and the car's headlights turned on. I froze. I didn't move. Neither did they. It was like a silent standoff. Then, just as my heart started hammering in my chest, the car slowly pulled out of the lot and drove away. I sat there for a full minute, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Then I did the only thing I could think of. I called Stephanie. She let me in without a word. Her place was small, a one-bedroom rental in a quiet neighborhood. But when I stepped inside, I noticed something immediately. She had packed bags by the door. You're leaving? I asked. She nodded. I don't feel safe here anymore. I swallowed. I think I was followed. Her eyes widened. By who? I shook my head. I don't know. Then, without another word, she walked over to the kitchen, pulled a chair away from the table, and lifted the rug underneath. And there it was. A black duffel bag, stuffed full of cash. I crouched down, unzipped it just enough to see the thick stacks of $100 bills. I exhaled sharply. This is bad, I murmured. She sat down across from me. I know. My mind raced. This wasn't normal. This wasn't just some scummy affair. Daniel was in something. Something deep. And I was starting to wonder if he was in over his head. A problem. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know if I should go. But then, just before the call ended, I heard something in the background. A voice. Not Daniel's. A man's. Low. Serious. And then, your wife has something that doesn't belong to her. I felt my blood turn to ice. And then the call cut out. Daniel's words echoed in my head. Your wife has something that doesn't belong to her. My hands were shaking. The call had cut off, but the fear it left behind was very much alive. Stephanie stared at me. What the hell was that? I could barely speak. I think someone's with him. She swallowed. And they think I have something? Our eyes dropped to the black duffel bag still sitting on the floor between us. I had a choice. I could run. Pretend I never heard that call. Leave Daniel to whatever mess he got himself into. Or I could face it head on. I had spent 12 years of my life trusting this man. Loving him. And now I needed to know just how deep this went. I grabbed my car keys. I'm going. Stephanie shot up. You can't be serious. He sounded scared, I muttered. Daniel doesn't get scared. I wasn't defending him. I wasn't trying to be his savior. But if someone was threatening me, I needed to know why. Stephanie hesitated. Then she grabbed the duffel bag, zipped it shut, and slung it over her shoulder. I'm coming with you. I didn't argue. My house felt different when I pulled up. The lights were on. The front door was slightly ajar. A sinking feeling settled in my chest. Stephanie and I exchanged a look. I stepped inside first, my heart hammering against my ribs. The moment I crossed the threshold, I saw him. Daniel. standing in the living room, his shirt wrinkled, his hands at his sides. And across from him, two men. One was tall, lean, sharp-eyed. The other was built like a brick wall. Neither of them looked friendly. The sharp-eyed man turned when he saw me. He murmured. The wife. Stephanie stepped in behind me, and his eyes flickered to her. Then, to the duffel bag slung over her shoulder. He said again, but this time, he smiled. And the money. My breath caught. Daniel's gaze darted to the bag. His face twisted. You brought it. Stephanie tensed. You told me to take it out. I took it out. The sharp-eyed man took a slow step forward. So, we have a misunderstanding then. He looked at Daniel. You told us you didn't have it. Daniel's jaw tightened. He didn't respond. And that's when I realized he lied to them. I want answers, I said, voice shaking. The man raised an eyebrow. Oh, honey, you're a little late for that. Try me. He studied me for a moment, then sighed dramatically. Your husband made a deal. Took some money that didn't belong to him. Thought he was clever enough to move it around. He gestured at the duffel bag. But that was supposed to come back to us. And instead, he funneled it through her. He jerked his chin toward Stephanie. Daniel's voice was tight. I just needed time. Time for what? I snapped. He hesitated. And in that hesitation, I saw the truth. He had never planned on fixing this. Daniel had been stalling. Lying. Hoping that if he delayed long enough, it would all just go away. I let out a shaky breath. So, what now? I asked the sharp-eyed man. You kill us? His lips curled. Oh, sweetheart. We're not animals. He tilted his head. We just want our money. I exhaled sharply. Fine. I took the duffel bag from Stephanie and tossed it onto the coffee table. Take it. Get out. The man's gaze didn't move from me. Then, after a pause, he nodded to his partner. The brick wall of a man picked up the bag, unzipped it, and thumbed through the cash. Satisfied, he gave a nod. The sharp-eyed man smiled. Pleasure doing business. Then, as if this was just another night, they walked out. I barely breathed until the door shut behind them. Then I turned on Daniel. You stole from them? My voice came out sharp. You stole from dangerous people? Daniel ran a hand over his face. It wasn't supposed to go like this. Stop, I snapped. Just stop. Stephanie let out a bitter laugh. You almost got us killed, Daniel. He looked at her then, and something flickered across his face. Regret? No. Shame. I stepped closer, shaking with anger. Why? I asked. Why did you do this? Why did you keep all of this from me? He hesitated. Then, finally, the words came. I didn't want to lose everything. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Well, congratulations, Daniel. You did. His eyes darkened. It wasn't just about me. I had a kid to take care of. I flinched. Stephanie scoffed. You mean my kid? You barely helped Daniel. You threw money at the problem and thought that made you a father. His jaw clenched. And then, for the first time, he snapped. I was trying, okay? I was drowning. I made bad choices, but I did it for him. No, I said quietly. You did it for you. His nostrils flared, but he didn't argue. Because he knew I was right. The silence stretched. Then, finally, I spoke the words that had been sitting on my tongue since the moment I saw those photos. This is over. Something flickered in his eyes. You don't mean that. Stephanie sighed. Of course she does. I turned toward her, my mind already made up. Come on, I murmured. Let's go. And without looking back, I walked out the door. The divorce was fast. Daniel didn't fight it. He didn't have the money or the energy to drag it out. I got the house, most of the assets. Stephanie left town. Moved somewhere new with her son. We kept in touch for a while. But eventually, life moved on. And Daniel? The last I heard, he was working some dead-end job, drowning in debt. I never saw him again. And honestly, I don't think I ever will. It took me a long time to process everything. To accept that the man I had built a life with never really existed, not in the way I thought. But I learned something. People show you who they are. And when they do, believe them.